after her crushing defeat in the presidential election, Vice President Kamala Harris took to Hawaii for a long vacation to lick her wounds, to regroup. But then she came back and she put a video out to her supporters. Have a look.
It's why you're part of this call right now and all the work that you did over those 107 days and even before. That's your nature. And the outcome of this election obviously is not what we wanted. It is not what we worked so hard for. Because of your efforts, get this, we raised an historic $1.4 billion, almost $1.5 billion from grassroots supporters alone. And I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you.
There are a lot of questions about that video, Brian. I'm not going to speculate on that. We know that Vice President Kamala Harris is well known for her word salads. Mm-hmm. We know that she is not a great orator. I just find that the coming back after a long period of time and talking about some of the things she did in that video, like, for example, raising $1.5 billion. There are a lot of questions, and touting that and bragging about it, a lot of questions around what happened to that $1.5 billion. A lot of money went to celebrities and concerts and stuff like that. Yet she still lost the most expensive presidential election ever. And I don't know, there seems to be something quite off here.
Well, it's a very strange video, from the framing of it to the word salad. It's being mocked online with people inserting a bottle of Hennessy into her hand. All the discussion all throughout the campaign that, there were times where she sounded like she was drunk or something. And I thought people were being overly partisan with that. And then I'm watching with some folks that are not political just before the election, one of her speeches, and they're like, is she drunk?
Yeah.
And that was an on-stage speech. Like, that's not a good sign. And now that's worked its way into the pop culture with Saturday Night Live. When they profile her, always a big glass in her hand, things like that.
Yeah.
When you lose, just go away for a while. Go away gracefully. And if you want to come back, do that later. Now, people will say Donald Trump didn't do that. You're absolutely right. But then when he did finally leave after the inauguration, people didn't hear from him for a long time. He had the fights and was declaring that it was cheating and all of that. But then he did go away for a bit, and people stopped paying attention to him. If she wants to run again, which I think is a horrible idea, she should just lay low for a while, regroup, come up with ideas, figure out how to speak without sounding like it's a word salad, without sounding like you're loopy, and then put together a team and assemble. But the fact is, she never won a primary. She had fewer votes in 2020 in support of her than Tulsi Gabbard, who is now going to be in Donald Trump's cabinet, assuming she gets confirmed. Those are all bad signs for her. She's not a good politician. Should have stayed as a senator. She's had her time. Go sit on a board somewhere. I'm sure someone out in California will
yeah. She's told her people, I don't know who's left around that circle for her, but she's told her people that they need to keep all of her options open, that maybe she's looking at a nomination for 2028 presidential bid. Perhaps she wants to run for governor of California, her home state, because then that would open up for Gavin Newsom to potentially run for the nomination, for the presidential nomination. So interesting things sort of happening in that regard. But as Kamala Harris has now returned from her Hawaii vacation, it's not just her that's sort of doing the reflection. It's also her campaign staff. Her campaign staff was sort of like this Frankenstein group of Obama people, Biden people, some Harris people that were just thrown in together because they only had 100+ days to run this campaign. And so we always saw the stories, Brian, that there was internal struggles, there were battles about who was really in charge, there was discussions about what format their campaign should take, what shape it should take, where she should go, should she do interviews, all these sorts of things. So a bunch of her campaign staff go on this Pod Save America to sort of do their own autopsy on on the election. And have a listen to what her campaign manager, General O'Malley Dillon, had to say.
In the post-election analysis, there has been, even from some folks, anonymously at least, inside the campaign, some critique of some of the spending decisions around things like the set for Call Her Daddy, this, renting the Sphere, that sort of stuff. Can you talk a little bit? I'd love to hear you respond to those criticisms, and then maybe give, just want to get clarity on the point, is that do you think when you guys have done all the books, that whether the DNC will be in debt at the end of this race?
So, first of all, I think it was an extraordinary testament to the vice president to have the kind of grassroots support that she had, and built on the foundation of the list and the support that President Biden had and had built and we cultivated over years. We had some unique things that we had to do in this race that I think were really critical to do early, and spent a lot of resources at an earlier stage than we would have traditionally.
Is that ads?
But also the field programming. And doing so made us make really key choices. Call Her Daddy was really an important choice to make.
So in that, Dillon is saying, we had this truncated period of time. We had questions about whether or not we were doing interviews. She was not doing any interviews for the first few weeks, and then it was only after the fact. Then we have others on that campaign saying that when she did do interviews, they were, quote, dumb, or they were fluff. I'm not sure that these Democratic operatives really understand what happened here, or why they lost.
Well, they spent too much money on celebrities, on
That's
paying
right.
Oprah to interview her. The first interview she did with Dana Bash, with Tim Walz sitting next to her like a chaperone.
It was weird.
It was very weird. You have to give the Harris campaign credit. They made it close in terms of the popular vote. They made it closer than Biden had it when they took over. Remember, Biden was going to lose places like Virginia to Trump because people just thought, wow, that guy's lost it. We can't vote for him anymore. She brought that back. But why was she paying to have a huge rally in Houston, advertising that Beyonce is going to be there? Then Beyonce doesn't even sing. She was doing rallies in concerts with celebrities, and people were coming out for the singers and then leaving after the song's done and before Harris is speaking. She needed to win swing states, and she lost them all because they concentrated on the wrong things. Again, they were never going to win Texas. Was it worth it for whatever down ballot strategy you had to have that big rally in Houston? I don't really think so.
Well, not necessarily, because the Republicans have held the House and got the Senate. But on that, in terms of the strategy and where the polls were and making it close, we were all given the narrative for weeks that this is it. It's going to turn on a dime. And what's interesting about David Plouffe, who of course is an Obama guy, who helped out on the Harris campaign, he openly said, I don't know where these public polls are coming from, because there's none of our internals have shown her with a lead anywhere. Maybe there was a week here or there. But he even said, even after the debate performance, which wasn't that bad for Kamala Harris, she didn't even get a bump out of that. So yeah. I'm wondering, this as these Democrats reflect, they didn't push the economy because Harris was in a bizarre circumstance. She was part of an administration that the public wanted to punish: inflation, the immigration crisis, cost of living, border issues. So it's a tough line to follow for her.
Well, they were tight in some places. Like I was in Arizona October 11th to 17th, so 3 weeks before the election. And when I landed in Phoenix, she was there. She'd been there for 2 days. And reputable local pollsters had her and Trump tied at that point. And early voting had just started. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance had been in the state before. Biden had flipped it because of the Phoenix area, Maricopa County, because it went Democrat for him. Now, there's Republican areas of Arizona, there's Democrat areas. Maricopa County is the one that matters. She had to get in there and talk about the economy because that's what people were worried about. And the stat that I've cited several times in columns and in chats like this is house prices went up 47% in the Phoenix area between 2020 and 2024. The city was becoming unaffordable. People needed to hear about that and about their groceries, not about joy. They needed assurance. And, talking to regular people who said they were torn, they had problems with Trump, but felt that he would be better for them and their family on the economy. Even talking to one woman who said, yeah, I've got concerns about abortion. I'm worried about Project 2025, but I have to worry about my family's financial health. She couldn't connect on that. And I think that and, Trump went into northern Arizona a couple days after I got there, and he went hard on immigration, which she was the border czar for. She didn't have an answer on the two biggest issues in places like that she had to win.
And Brian, there are now a number of Democratic mega donors. I mean, these are the folks that give millions to the campaigns in various years. And so one in particular recently said, Kamala Harris couldn't run a campaign, don't know where the money went. There's no way she could run the country. Have a listen.
The name is Morgan, and he has raised a lot of money for Democrats. Happy Thanksgiving, big brother. Thank you very much for coming on this show and helping my audience.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
So, John, I never heard anything like this before. Do you think somebody stole the money?
Well, maybe legally. I mean, look, to me, you remember the movie Mad Max when everybody's just doing whatever they wanted, the end of the world? That's what happened here. All of a sudden, everybody's got the keys to the candy store. Ad buyers, talent, consultants. There's 100 days to do it. And the money started pouring in. Remember this, Chris. It wasn't pouring in for Harris. It was pouring in against Trump. Everybody that was voting and supporting Harris was really voting against Trump. And everybody that was voting for Trump was voting for Trump. So she had all this money coming in. She had all these consultants. And if you don't run the ads, you don't get paid for the buy. They were running ads in Florida, where I live, nonstop. And I'm like, why? I mean, are they running them in Alabama and Idaho too? And I'll tell you why. If you don't run the ads, the buyer doesn't get paid. A $900,000 to put her face on the Sphere in Las Vegas. In the Sphere, the ego, the crazy, the commissions. I was at the White House for a dinner Friday night, talking to a lot of people. And I'm telling you, man, there's a lot of whispering. There's a lot of names about who got paid this and who got paid that. And a lot of people got rich on the back of donors trying to stop Trump.
Because that comment, I think, is emblematic of the bigger problem with many of the questions surrounding the campaign, particularly on the spending. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of putting her face on the Sphere in Las Vegas. To what end? Why? They spent the claims that they paid over $1.5 million for Oprah's production company. They paid to set up the Call Your Daddy set for over $100,000. Supposedly Beyonce got millions of dollars. And so again, there's a potential that this campaign that raised $1.5 billion, which Kamala Harris just bragged about in that video, is now going to be $20 million in debt. So let's look 2 years from now. There's going to be midterms. I know things will change. The landscape is going to change. Mega donors that have propped up this Democratic Party for 20 years, are they leaving? Are they just going to say, okay, this was a bad candidate? How do you see that?
You've already seen a bunch of large-scale donors, people like Bill Ackman, David Sachs. They used to be on the Democrat side. Elon Musk was Democrat until recently. A bunch of them have left. And there's another area where she couldn't connect. She had a hard time connecting with men. And I know some people put it down to sexism. I would just say they didn't feel like she could run the economy. And as you say, couldn't run the campaign properly. So there's a valid question there. But, she was willing to go on, call her daddy, but wouldn't go on with Joe Rogan, who's the most listened to man in America, and had offered to set things up. They gave him a last minute, yes, we'll come on, but you've got to fly to us. And he's like, no, you got to come to Houston. This is where the studio is. Would that have helped? It goes back to the whole interview strategy that they didn't have a good one. And she wasn't able to connect with people who were in business and moving away, like Ackman, like Sachs, like Musk. She wasn't able to connect with men. You can dismiss it as the bro, techno culture, whatever you want. But these people vote, and they voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump.
I do not think she would have fared well in a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan. It takes a lot of stamina.
It would have been 30 minutes.
Yeah, and then Joe Rogan wouldn't have done it. All right. Well, Brian, maybe Kamala Harris will be the comeback kid in a few years' time. But in the meantime, she should stop posting those videos. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to thetorontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.